over the last few years. The Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science has welcomed several new faculty members. And over the next few months, we'd like to introduce them to you. Tonight, we check in with Dr. Melissa Gervais, who joined the department in 2017. Thanks for visiting with us, Melissa, and welcome to Weather World.
Thanks for having me, John.
You bet. Well, why don't we start by you just telling us a little bit about your path to Penn State?
Yeah, so I'm Canadian. So my path actually began at the University of Toronto when I was an undergrad, and I did my master's there as well. After that, I moved to McGill University in Montreal, where I did my PhD. So I would say, thinking about my background, I had two advisors, one who was a synoptic meteorologist and another who studied sea ice. So I had a bit of kind of an interesting background from that standpoint. And that led me to have a lot of really kind of interesting experiences while I was there. So I guess some of the kind of more exciting things I got to do, at least at the start of my career, was because I had an advisor who studied sea ice, I actually got to do some field work, which was really exciting for me. So I got to travel to the Arctic on an icebreaker. I spent 6 weeks going all the way from Banks Island in the Beaufort Sea, all the way through the Northwest Passage and then near Greenland and all the way back down to Quebec City. So I got to really experience sea ice, which is something I'm really interested in now. And so that was really exciting for me to really be able to see it up close. As you might learn over the course of this conversation, most of my work now is actually in modeling and in analyzing output from models. So I don't get to kind of have that hands-on interaction that I was lucky to get when I was earlier in my career.
Well, we'll come back to the research, but I wanted to say a little bit about teaching, because one connection that we have is we both teach freshmen. I teach the introductory meteorology class in their first semester, and then you teach them how to computer program in their second semester. Share with us some of your observations of teaching coding to freshman meteorology majors.
Yeah, so actually, I love teaching that class. I think maybe you feel the same way, John. I think it's such an interesting time in our students' lives, the first year when they come to Penn State. In my class, I'm teaching them something that they might have had very little experience with. So sometimes students come in and it's so new that it can be a little scary. I mean, learning something like coding that may seem really foreign can be a little scary at the start, but it's really fun. I mean, over the course of that semester, they learn so much. And by the end, they can really tackle these really practical problems. And so I feel like it's a really fun class to set them up for the rest of their careers at Penn State. And also in the future, they can really use those skills.
Right. And, at the other end of the academic spectrum, you teach statistics to graduate students. Talk about the importance of a firm foundation in statistics for modern atmospheric scientists.
Yeah, so we use a variety of techniques in our field, a variety of statistical techniques for analyzing our data. And so it is, I think, really important that we understand kind of the pitfalls and the practical application of those and how we go about it. So I think it's kind of a nice class for getting our students ramped up, especially if they're earlier on in their research careers as grad students. They can learn a lot of tools, and I like to show them a really wide range of tools that they can use and they can expand upon in their own research.
Yeah. Now, in addition to your role in our department, you're also a co-hire with the Institute for Computational and Data Sciences here at Penn State. Now, how does that affiliation play into your work?
Yeah, so I'd say that currently what is the most interesting about that affiliation has been the connections I get to make with other faculty across a variety of disciplines at Penn State. So there are a variety of co-hires across the entire university. And so it's been really interesting, I think, for me to get to know them. And we all are kind of linked through either our use of big data or perhaps our use of machine learning, which is something that I do. And so that's been really great for collaboration. So as an example, I'm currently collaborating with Christelle Gauthier in geoscience and Guido Cervone in geography and also Meteo. So we have a postdoc who's using deep learning. And so the idea was to bring deep learning which is a type of machine learning, into our fields. And so that collaboration was really facilitated by us being linked through ICDS. And so I feel like there's a lot of nice opportunities in that from that standpoint.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back then to say a little bit more about your research, specifically in the Arctic. It seems like just about every year, Arctic sea ice is in the news, usually because over the long term, it's decreasing in coverage. What's the most interesting research question you're working on in that field?
Yeah, so I'm doing a couple of things in that field that we could talk about. One question that I think is really interesting and has been in the news a lot, and is something that I think as a field we're all working really hard to understand, is how will actual patterns of variability and the weather that we experience change as a result of reduced Arctic sea ice. And so I have a graduate student working on this right now. And what we're doing, we're taking the approach of using some machine learning to look at this. And so we can actually use, in this case, self-organizing maps, which is a machine learning tool that's really helpful for kind of defining what we mean by patterns of variability. So if we're thinking in the past, what we might have done, I'm sure your viewers have seen weather maps on the show, right? And if you see enough of those, you can sort of start to understand that there are different patterns that are pretty common, right? Maybe you see a ridge or a trough across North America, and maybe it'll march along and go from west to east over time. So what's really useful is that these machine learning techniques can actually mimic what we would do in our own minds, where we would look at a bunch of patterns and kind of learn what the dominant patterns are. And so it can kind of remove, I can't look at 300 years of patterns and do that myself. I mean, I could, but it would take a long time. But we're using these kind of methods to look at that. And so then we can start, combining that with our climate modeling, where we can artificially remove Arctic sea ice and kind of look at, well, how do these patterns change? How does their character change in the future? How does how often they occur change? Yeah. Do we more often see patterns with large ridges out west, or do we see that less often? Yeah. So those are some of the kind of questions I've been working on.
Yeah, and the kinds of things we talk about often on Weather World. Dr. Melissa Gervais, one of my colleagues in the Penn State Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science, thanks for stopping by.